Since its creation in 2008, the Marvel Cinematic Universe has made more than $32 billion. That's just at the box office. We're not taking into consideration Avengers lunchboxes or Jeff the Landshark fan art commissions. Those numbers would simply boggle your mind. In spite of this crazy success, in recent years the name has found itself tarnished somewhat, with the only real Marvel on display being how many buckets of fan service they can convincingly fit into a single film, the sheer number of the effects artists who repeatedly get worked to the bone for insane deadlines, and all these incredibly long YouTube videos where people talk about these films for far too long. He's right behind me, isn't he? But surely it wasn't always like this. How did we even get here? To figure this out, I'm going to be taking a journey back through time and watching every single Marvel movie that was released over here in theatres up to the build-up of 2008 Iron Man, when the MCU officially started. So throughout the course of this video, I'm going to be sticking to 3 simple guidelines that I'll follow throughout. First of all, did I enjoy the movie? I think that's quite crucial. Second, would I rewatch it? And finally, this is quite a big one, are the errors too glaring to look past? As we go, I'm going to be pinning every single one of them to this tier list here, and no matter how low we go down the rankings, no matter how horrendously bad Howard the Duck is, I mean how horrendously bad any of the films are, I'm going to try and find something positive and redeemable to say about each and every one of them. Trust me, that's a lot harder than it sounds. Have you ever wanted to see a duck naked? 1986, Howard the Duck? If for some reason you answered yes to that question, maybe call someone you're close with, have them check in on you and see if you're doing okay. This is in the opening 5 minutes of the film. Which little freak decided to make this happen? Do I have to pixelate those duck nipples? That's a sentence no one should ever say. Coming from the visionary mind of George Lucas, Howard the Duck answers the age-old question of what would happen if you structured an entire film around a joke you found funny one time and just sort of hoped for the best.
That's it. No more Mr. Nice Duck.
To me at least, it seems like they thought people would be so distracted by how funny Howard being a duck was that they forgot to include all those more trivial things like a plot or scenes that won't horrify me till the end of my days. Like, look how funny this is, he's drinking a beer, ducks don't do that. Wow, he's shooting a neutron disintegrator at a dark overlord. What a silly little mallard he is. And now he's... Should I be watching this? I think this should go on a different website. Every single plotline, quippy comment, and moment of romantic tension all hinges on the fact that Howard over here is a duck who has found themselves transported to a world full of human people who, crucially, are not ducks.
It's so lifelike and realistic.
Bug off.
Excuse me?
At the start of this, you can get on board with this reaction, especially when you're first confronted with Howard chilling on his chair after a hard day of work, whacking on the TV, and then, I guess, he gets ready to start quackstabating. But once you get about 30 to 40 minutes into this film and you see yet another new bunch of people reacting to Howard in the exact same way, it starts to get a bit grating. I'm not asking for moments of harrowing emotional depth in a film about a talking duck. I know what I'm signing up for when I watch this film. But if you're making a comedy and your comedy isn't consistently funny, I'm obviously going to start looking around and noticing what's happening. This isn't to say that the film is completely devoid of joy.
He's my boyfriend!
That's disgusting.
In fact, this whole sequence is when it's at its best, whether that's Dr. Jennings getting possessed by the Dark Overlord and for some reason decides to start workshopping his Type 5.
If you can't take the heat, get out of that kitchen.
I guess even evil overlords need a chance to blow off steam every now and again. This is quite comfortably one of the strangest movies I've watched this year, and again, not wanting to repeat myself too much, this is sort of hit home by the fact that a crucial plot point to this film, one of the deepest moments of emotional trauma, comes from Leah Thompson rubbing tail feathers with a duck. And it's for that reason that this film absolutely canons to the bottom of F. Of course it's going to be an F, man. That scene will never leave my mind. 1989. The Punisher. We move from gooning to the world of goons as we witness the Punisher mow down a pretty impressive number of mobsters during this film's runtime. But what makes this feat all the more incredible is how Dolph Lundgren accomplishes this while simultaneously looking like he's about 4 seconds away from sneezing and also not trying to get a noise complaint.
He's your best friend. Why do you want to take him down with you?
I knew I was going to be in for a wild ride with this film when I looked into the cast list on IMDb and found that one of the highest billed characters is simply called Tanaka's daughter. Now that is a level of craftsmanship you can only dream of achieving. I shouldn't expect anything else from a film that casually throws out a slur in the first 16 minutes. And no, I will not be showing a clip of that. This is an action film without any real action. The plot doesn't really exist, and the fight scenes pretty much look like behind the scenes footage before the cameras have been put in position and then someone's accidentally shouted action, so we've got to roll with it. People just sort of chill in the background of shots, sort of looking where they're supposed to go next, and then when they do want to ramp up the tension, they have these moments of mania, they choose to do it with the most bonkers editing choices. The camera moves all over the place as they're trying to replicate this sense of energy and tension, when in reality, we all know that a bunch of extras are just stacking it over and over again, which is obviously incredibly funny to watch, but I also have no idea what's happening. Now, on some level, I can understand this casting of Frank Castle. Dolph is massive and constantly looks dead behind the eyes, which, considering what this version of Frank goes through in the film, makes sense. It would just help if occasionally he looked like he wanted to be there. By far and away my favourite part of this is an odd little fellow called Shake. They're just chilling out, drinking, and like his namesake, occasionally bursts out in rhymes when the mood takes him. Clearly I'm not alone in feeling this way, because for some baffling reason, in a pivotal scene in the film, Frank just decides to bring him along for this incredibly high stakes mission to rescue mobster children from the Yakuza, and then lets him walk home on his own. Then, moments later, after another intense shootout commences, something truly incredible happens. We see a rare moment of weakness as Frank is finally bested, when a single Yakuza member walks menacingly into the centre of frame, slowly revealing their mask to show that all along, it was Tanaka's daughter. From the IMDb page, now that's fantastic writing. It's going into D, for do you think it's going to get any worse from here on out? And would it shock you to know that yes, it is, almost immediately. 1990. Captain America. This film is atrocious. Somehow, even with the caliber of things I've already subjected myself to, I can sit here and confidently say this is absolutely the worst one so far. I don't even need to explain myself here, but bang, there it goes, straight into F. And yet, I cannot stop thinking about it. Before I get into the negatives, the thing that actually amazes me about this film is how brave the people in charge of this whole thing actually were, as they tried something I don't think I've ever seen attempted in film. We all know Steve is a man out of time who's literally been frozen in the past. So to replicate this feeling of denial and confusion, they decided to cast someone who clearly has no idea what a movie is. It's fascinating to watch him in real time discover what cameras are. I don't think any of this is helped by the fact that throughout the entirety of the film, Captain America is wearing a glorified swimming cap over his entire body and is slowly losing feeling in each limb. As each scene runs longer and longer, he looks like he's in the process of slowly being vacuum packed. Out of everything in this, I fear most for the people that probably had to get him in and out of that thing. It would have been like pulling the sword from the stone. It's also incredibly clear to me that the guy who played Steve, who just happens to be the son of Claire Douglas and J.D. Salinger, had to have gone to the LA Noire School of Facial Expressions. I don't need to be trained in deception to figure out that he is very clearly up to something here.
Would you please pull over the car? I am going to get sick.
Oh, okay, all right. Are you okay? Yeah. All right.
By the way, you did see that correctly. Captain America pretended to be sick so he can Scooby-Doo run away from this old man and steal his car. But by far and away the worst thing in this film is how Steve manages to pull off the exact same car trick again 20 minutes later in the film, but this time he's stranding the daughter of someone that he fell in love with in a completely different country. What a true American hero. Moving away from just pointing out insane moments in the film, I'm going to try and approach this a bit more professionally, because from a structural point of view, this film is a mess. Okay, here we go. Characters constantly change locations and even countries at whim. They have a whole scene in the film's intro where people speak Italian but only occasionally show subtitles. The pace of the editing and the action sequences is blistering at the worst of times. The plot is crazy boring, and somehow the president reenacts the scene from Falcon and the Winter Soldier 20 years before it came on Disney+. And tonally, it is all over the place. I don't think it knows whether it wanted to be an okay comic book movie or a subpar spy thriller. So it does something innovative and combines both of them into an even bigger pile of garbage. From what I can gather from looking into this, the budget became a bit stretched, hence why some of the ending scenes seem a bit rushed. But then again, the thing that I like most about this film obviously came from those financial restraints. Instead of going over the top showing Steve's initial transformation, they just show various body parts flexing out of nowhere. That's like super smart. It's just a shame that it doesn't keep up in that vein ever. It's so strange to me that even though we're 3 films into this, there's already a pretty consistent theme that connects all of the films we've watched so far. That they're all trying to distance themselves from the stereotypes surrounding comics in the 80s and 90s. Whether that's with the Punisher removing the Skull logo, Captain America changing the backstory of Red Skull so they could have a little holiday in Italy/Croatia, or Howard the Duck doing... I don't think I need to mention the Mr. Bestiality again, do I? I know this isn't the same for everyone, but for me, my earliest memories with Marvel came from the tiny, stupid version of me watching the animated shows when I was an annoying child. So looking back, it is incredibly strange to see these movies gearing so heavily towards adults and not the younger generation. That's gotta be the way to make money from these things, right? It's the obvious, logical next step. Okay, this was the first time I've seen that film. It fucking rips. 1998. Blade. Do you know how refreshing it was for me after enduring those 3 films back to back to back, and then going to something as unapologetically cool as Blade? Everything from the music, the lighting, the dialogue, the editing of the fight sequences to the actual choreography itself does such a good job at setting a general vibe that the film sticks to from the start to the end. I'm pretty sure the coat alone should have been nominated for Best Actor. From the intro scene alone, I knew this film was going to hook me in. It's loud, grotesque, in your face, but crucially, it has its quieter moments to balance everything out. It's pretty much the perfect representation of the entire film, with it also highlighting my biggest complaint here. The film is too damn goopy, man. There's so many scenes of people kissing with bloody, slippery faces on bloody, slippery surfaces. I guess it's either that or the exploding people. That's strange. I'm not going to sit here looking like this and act like it's the greatest story ever told. Those lore segments about Le Maigre, the history of the vampires that go on for far too long, absolutely drag the momentum of the film down. But then again, if that's what you want from this film, that's entirely your business. Because this is a crucial thing when actually watching a lot of these films, this idea of expectation versus reality. When I'm watching Howard the Duck, I'm not going into it expecting the same things as Blade. I want laughs, jokes, comedic hijinks and innuendo, and when that doesn't happen too often, I would say Blade is a funnier film. Howard's terrible plot very obviously sticks out. Whereas when I'm watching a film like this, I want to see people receive the worst fate I could possibly imagine, which is basically being absolutely annihilated in the coolest way possible before being poorly disintegrated by CGI. I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. And because the film absolutely delivers on that front, the fact that the story isn't the most exhilarating or really makes any form of sense isn't the greatest deal in the world, because at least one part of my caveman brain is happy. That said though, there are many moments of jank from strange stock sound effects, weird overdubbing or microphone pickups which make the audio sound really strange, to the scene where Frost's hand reforms and it looks like it's made out of Ribena bubbles. But again, this film is as old as me, so I'm going to let that slide. We're going to be jumping up massively here, and I don't know if it's just because the first 3 were that bad, or because deep down I guess I want a leather trench coat. But to me, this is absolutely an A-tier film. But who cares, because my ranking means nothing. I have no idea what I'm doing. Before we get into the next one and I do an incredibly hard cut to me wearing that stupid outfit, I thought I'd just pop in here underneath this lamp that makes it look like I've had an incredible idea to say something quite serious for a moment. The next one we're about to go through, I think, is our first example of a film that we've covered helmed by a truly horrendous human being. I don't think I possess the vocabulary to describe how awful they are. This video in general is supposed to be about the incredibly vast teams of people that work together to bring these things to light, and not the work of one truly massive dickhead. So let's collectively ignore them forever. X-Men. 2000. Just like Blade before it, one of the things that you can really commend X-Men for is how it seamlessly humanizes these heroes within this world that we're so familiar with. Right off the bat, the decision to open on a scene of a young Eric Lenscher being forcibly separated from his family at Auschwitz is so unbelievably powerful. It really makes the current era of MCU movies look absolutely abhorrent in comparison. Oh really, Scott Lang's dealing with a dude who can shoot lasers out of his hands, and look, there's another popular celebrity of the moment popping up in a post-credits scene. Wow, Disney, you're really saying something brave there. Props to you. Just like a lot of the films that I'm covering here, it would be incredibly easy for me to dunk on the visual effects here because yikes. Senator Kelly gets hit with a glorified Microsoft PowerPoint slide transition. Some of the things they do in the absence of 2025 computer wizardry is way more impactful, like just using echoey audio to sell Charles talking in someone's head. That being said though, although I watched this film quite a lot as a tiny child, there is one glaring thing that I completely forgot about and only noticed upon rewatching it. For a film called X-Men, it does a very good job of only focusing on one specific dude. Should have been called X-Man. That is awful. Granted, the X-Man they focus on is incredibly cool, and there is a reason that that same tiny child became obsessed with Wolverine for a long time after this, but I completely forgot how it just completely disregards pretty much every other member that isn't Logan, Rogue, or Professor X, which in a movie about a team of people doesn't seem like the best strategy. Brother, in a scene towards the end of the film, Storm gets absolutely dunked on by Toad. Not once, not twice, but 3 times. That being said though, a lot of the people that they do choose to focus on give some incredible performances, with Sir Ian McKellen and Sir Patrick Stewart stealing every scene that they're even tangentially connected to.
Storm, fry him.
Oh yes, a bolt of lightning into a huge copper conductor. I thought you lived at a school.
Storm and Cyclops are essentially set dressing here. I fully thought they were in it way more. Obviously this film is good, but for some reason or another it didn't really gel with me as much as Blade. Don't know if that was because it's an X-Men film and it focuses on one person, or actually the black leather suits it's definitely going into be. 2002. Blade 2. You know when I said 5 minutes ago that I really wished Blade focused more on the punching people and turning them into CGI dust, and not the whole Lord about the vampires? Well, it seems Christmas has come early and I've got a hefty present to unwrap. Although I was a big fan of the fight sequences in the first film, Blade 2 ramps it up at every possible opportunity. A massive part of that is because of the energy and movement that Guillermo del Toro brings to this sequel, but also the insane work of the stunt and fight choreographers. Because even from the first scene we're seeing sweeping camera movements, Blade doing flips pretty much whenever he gets the opportunity, and so many people just turning to dust. It seems like the main goal throughout the entirety of this shoot was, how can we make every single scene as cool as it possibly could be?
Take me to it, and I'll consider you a loose end.
Even the premise of the sequel fits that same bill, because Blade is forced to team up with a team of vampires called the Blood Pack to take down an even more evil strain of vampires called Reapers. I think if you looked up the phrase really cool shit in the dictionary, Blade 2 would just ping out at you and eviscerate you into CGI dust. But for me, the thing that sets it apart from the first one is how it utilizes lighting and the absence of it. But throughout, it maintains a visual language with certain color palettes heightening moments of tension, with this contrast between harsher oranges and quieter blue tones signifying whether daylight or Reapers are in the vicinity. I know it doesn't sound cool, and I look like this whilst I'm saying it. To me, that's really cool. And again, I look like this because I googled 2000s fashion and a lot of turtlenecks popped up, so this isn't what I wear in my day-to-day life. It isn't the perfect film, and just like the first one, it is incredibly formulaic at times. But overall, I think it just about beats the first Blade. But if I'm honest, I've gone back and forth on this decision quite a lot today. I think the only reason it's going there is because Ron Perlman and Donnie Yen are in this. Oh yeah, also because it has this line in it.
Trying to attract them, not scare them off.
Yeah, well, some of us can't see in the dark, you fucking nipplehead. What am I supposed to do?
2002, Spider-Man. Genuinely, I don't know where to start with this film, and it upsets me so much that I'm going to talk about it whilst looking like this. But I don't think you need me to say how good this film is. But in comparison to pretty much everything else we've seen so far, there needs to be some form of cosmic jump between them, because it holds up unbelievably well. Not just against other superhero movies, but movies in general. I've said this a few times already, but one of my favourite things here is how such simplistic choices make both Peter, Spider-Man and the world around them feel so much realer to the audience. From practical effects in certain instances, really simple fades and dissolves between certain scenes, the actors actually wearing real suits, and the most crucial thing to me, a bunch of New Yorkers talking about Spider-Man.
He stinks and I don't like him.
It humanises it so much, and if we're being real, some of the actual extras in this film do more to stop the evil villain than Storm and Cyclops do 2 years prior. To me at least, all of this is epitomised in this scene mere moments after he's confronted with the death of Uncle Ben. With rage bubbling inside of him, we see Peter swing for the first time as he chases the criminal down. Danny Elfman's score slowly builds up in the background that I'm not going to let you hear for copyright reasons, as we think this true moment of heroism is about to occur. He catches up with the Fiend, and then this happens.
Don't hurt me. Just give me a chance. Just give me a chance. What about my uncle? Did you give him a chance? Did you? Answer me!
God, that is so good. And again, I don't want to keep saying this, but it's such simplistic techniques. It's nothing fancy. All you do is lift a guy from shadows into the light, hit him with a musical sting, and then a flashback. I sound like such a nerd here. At least it fits with the look, I guess. Then on top of this, you've got crazy performances across the board. Not just Tobey Maguire, but Willem Dafoe, Cliff Robertson, and Rosemary Harris. Every scene with Uncle Ben and Aunt May always makes me so sad. And then you've got J.K. Simmons stealing every scene he's in. The one thing that did always confuse me though, even when I was a tiny child, and I'm imagining this is answered in Spider-Man lore that I'm just not familiar with, but how on earth does Jameson not know that these photos were taken by Spider-Man? These photos are unbelievably in focus. How did he get a picture of him in the air? But who cares, because without all of this we wouldn't have had one of the greatest transitions in all of film. That's just the biblically accurate university experience. It is absolutely incredible, and for me personally, I think it just canons into S. I also think there needs to be a bit more of a chasmic jump between these two levels. I have no idea what was going on in the late 90s and early 2000s, because look at that run we've just gone on. But sadly for this person, someone's clearly pulled the emergency brake on the train, because we are immediately coming to a very sharp stop. 2003. Daredevil. Where on earth do I start with this film? Okay, this is a rough one. I had to pause it there because for some reason Fox clearly didn't like what I had to say about Daredevil and claimed quite a lot of the footage used in this part. So from this point going forward, and with future Fox films I talk about in this video, if the footage used playing in front of me looks a bit botched, especially a specific fight sequence that I talk about in Daredevil that is very integral to what I'm talking about, that I have to reenact with myself and with sock puppets. Just remember, this is all because Fox claimed the living daylights out of it, so if we can we all collectively ignore that and imagine what I'm saying is completely true, as you should always do when watching my videos, and that the footage you're seeing is totally from the films and definitely not me in my room with a hat over my eyes. This movie is absolutely insane, which is so odd to me because whoever was in charge of this clearly loves Daredevil and wanted to shove as many cool things in there as physically possible, but in doing so they accidentally created brain rot TikTok editing 20 years before it became popular. I know I've said this a lot already, but trust me on this one, the editing in this film is absolutely fucking batshit. The pacing is nauseating. There is a sequence around 49 minutes in here where in the span of 15 seconds we cut to 3 different locations with 3 completely different characters experiencing 3 completely different things, which is crazy because at the point in this film we'd only met Kingpin 4 minutes ago and now we're using him as a connective branch to set up another villain. It completely takes the wind out of every scene that it happens in, and it happens quite a lot. This is all the more annoying because there are genuinely some incredibly cool elements in this film, like Michael Clarke Duncan as Kingpin is so good. From the first minute you see him and he just kills his 2 guards because he can, but it does very much seem like there are 2 Daredevil movies in this film fighting for top billing, because it's insane how little we actually see of him. I think in the entire film Matt and Fisk only meet 3 times. It is so clear to me that they thought this thing would be a rip-roaring success. They tried to plan ahead and have things in here that gave them more wriggle room in the inevitable sequel, whether that was Bullseye or... I forgot about them, Elektra, who, thanks to them, gives us one of the most awkward scenes I've ever seen in film. Again, this is mere moments after meeting this character for the first time. Matt manufactures a way to bump into her, follows her outside, proceeds to grab her, then says this: "Wait a second, take it easy. I don't like being touched. Why don't you tell me what you do like and we'll start there." Then naturally, because he's a random person saying that to another person they've only just met, they start attacking one another, which then causes these children in the background to start cheering, because obviously that's a normal human reaction to all of this. But all of this is blown completely out of the window when you realise that they framed it like Street Fighter. What is happening in this film? I need to lie down. Positives. Okay, positives. I would say a lot of Bullseye stuff is actually quite funny, especially the scene where he's just taken out Elektra's dad and then proceeds to say, "Bullseye, like an elderly relative who's hard of hearing and is talking about his favourite dart-based game show. But I don't know if that's a good thing or I'm just laughing because Colin Farrell's very funny. All of this is to say there are far too many things happening in this film at any one time. I haven't even found time to say that Evanescence Bring Me to Life is from the soundtrack of this film. That should have been the first thing I started talking about. It is by far and away the most 2000s movie soundtrack I've ever heard in my life. It is so angsty cool, and realistically, it sort of represents the whole pinnacle of these dark, gritty, realistic superheroes that I've very much suffered through so far, because seemingly that was the only way to translate these comics onto the big screen. You completely forget all the bright, colourful pages from the comics and I guess sunlight. Every dramatic scene is shot at night, the saturation is turned all the way down, no one is allowed to be goofy, unless you're Colin Farrell with a fat bullseye tattoo on your forehead. I think what makes this film all the more annoying to me is if they had actually focused on a singular storyline, I think it would have been a much better film. Not that it would have been a good film, but I guess it would have been better than garbage. Like the difference between a cold kebab you've forgotten about after a night out and a slightly warmer one. I think it's got to go at the top of F. Actually, no, under Howard the Duck you go. That's a fate I wouldn't wish on anyone, unless you're Leah Thompson, I guess. 2003. X2. Right off the bat, everybody says this, let's just go into this straight away. The opening of this film is absolutely incredible. The camera movements are frenetic but not nauseating. The classical music heightens everything, and I know it must have been literal hell for Alan Cumming to go through that ordeal every single day, but my god, Nightcrawler looks incredible, and his delivery time and time again is so good. I can almost forgive him for traumatizing the child version of Henry with his appearance in Spy Kids 1 with all those thumb things, what are they called? Flingles, flangles, flungles? I still think about them quite often. X2 was way better than I remember it being, and that's saying something because I really liked this film when I was little. The story is as compelling and meaningful as the first one, but the choice to have Stryker as this singular villain that both the X-Men and the Brotherhood can focus on means that every scene feels like it builds upon what came before it. Even the one where Mystique flirts with a guard, knocks him unconscious and then stabs some metal into his ass, which gives me a brand new fear to think about in social situations. But this does lead to my absolute favourite moment in the film, Magneto's prison escape, because again, just have an entire film of Ian McKellen saying stuff. He's so cool.
Too much iron in your blood.
Still though, it is absolutely just the Wolverine show, but I've come to report a fabulous update. The cast and crew remembered that they hired Storm for this film. We can all sleep at last. What was that? Cyclops? No, never heard of him. I mean, this is something I've only just found out when looking at my DVD cover for this film, but obviously the reason why I thought Scott was a main character in this series is because he's there, he's right on the cover, but looking into many other cases for X2, he's not even on the cover. I swear he's a main character. Have I just been Mandela affected? In the entirety of the first 2 films that I've seen so far, he is basically reduced to a guy that stands on the edge of frame and is angry. But I think you'd be angry too if you constantly shot lasers out of your eyes from a young age, and your girlfriend was constantly being hit on by a dude with an offensively receding hairline, didn't know it was this bad in this film, and goddamn knife hands. Crucially though, you've also got super poignant moments in this big action film, like Bobby coming out to his parents and then immediately getting shunned for it. Like, that's such a great scene. I think it absolutely has to go into A, just above the two blades. I feel like so far I've definitely annoyed quite a few people in terms of my actual ranking of these films, but you shouldn't take anything I say seriously because I have no idea what I'm talking about. 2003. Hulk. Even though this bit that you're seeing right now was recorded weeks ago when you're probably seeing it, I feel like already I need to brace myself for what I'm about to say. Okay, here goes. I actually like 2003's Hulk. Am I dead yet? Has it happened? Earlier on when talking about Blade, I mentioned this idea of expectation versus reality, and I think this is really where this film suffers. Most people just see him as this big lumbering green dude with purple pants who punches his way through problems. So obviously when you're coming into a film based on the Hulk, you want to see him absolutely annihilating everything in his path, and not a psychological thriller examining the effects of hereditary trauma and suppressed emotions. I think there's quite a big leap between these two things. I think it's such a brave decision to come at this incredibly popular character through a completely different lens that everyone was expecting. How Bruce is actively suffering through the decisions that his father made even to this day. How the Hulk is this feral, childlike anger, and he's a curse that's bestowed upon Banner that he has no control over. I mean, even how Bruce's father clearly despises Bruce.
I didn't come here to see you. I came here to see my son. My real son. The one inside of you.
As it reminds him of all the truly horrendous things he's done in his life. But all of that goes out the window when he sees this big green Donnie. He a big fan of the Hulk, but it does really feel in parts like a Universal monster movie rather than a big punching fest, especially with the first transformation where he's obscured in the shadows with the audience only being able to imagine what he looks like. I'm also going to imagine this is because they didn't want you focusing on the janky visuals, because my word, the Hulk is far too green in this thing. Whenever you see him in the cold light of day, especially against something that is green, you come to understand how saturated he is in comparison. His skin is far too smooth and shiny. He looks like a waxed bowling ball. There are also some incredibly good performances in this, from Sam Elliott as Thaddeus Ross, who's so menacing even with the little material he has, and especially Jennifer Connelly as Betty. Especially when you consider that she probably had to do all of these emotional, heart-wrenching scenes acting against a tennis ball. Also made me realise how difficult this film must have been for Eric Bana to film. Because of the nature of the Hulk, he can only become angry when he needs to turn into the big green guy. So when he's acting against someone and he isn't supposed to turn into the Hulk yet, he loses that entire emotion from his acting roster, which means that most of his line deliveries end up sounding completely flat. It's a really ambitious film, but here comes the massive but, the hulking but. It is both far too long, but also far too fast. We end up focusing on things that we should not care about for far too long, like just shots of people staring at whiteboards or looking out the window. But then when we cut forward to scenes that we should probably spend more time on, like the end of the film, you just absolutely zoom by it. I had no idea this fight had even ended, but absolutely none of that pales in comparison to the thing I absolutely despise the most about this film, and I think probably the most out of every single film in this list. The comic book transitions. They are so bad. I get the idea of trying to replicate that feeling of going through a comic book by cross-cutting and paneling different scenes on top of each other. But the crucial difference is that when you're reading, no matter what's happening on the page, there isn't a time limit that dictates when you need to get through everything. The things that happen in each panel or each word that you look past only happen when your eyes look at them. The audience almost has to pick one thing to focus on. Was this edited in Microsoft PowerPoint? I think out of all the films in this list, this is probably going to be one of the most divisive when watching it. I think you'll either really enjoy it or absolutely hate it. I also think a large part of why I'm a big fan of this is because I watched so many of these films in a row. When any of them tried to do anything different, it felt like a breath of fresh air. It's for this exact same reason I was such a big fan of Blade, and also I'm going to be quite positive about Fantastic Four later, but that's spoilers, we'll get to that in a minute. Overall, I think it slots in about here. I really think if the ending didn't exist and it wasn't edited like a Mr. Beast video, it probably would have been way higher. After a truly crazy run of films in quick succession, with Blade 2, Spider-Man, Daredevil, X2 and the Hulk all coming out within a year of each other, it's clear studios have finally started to realise how much sweet cheddar cheese you can make if you have someone jumping around attached to an array of wires in brightly coloured spandex. But as you're about to see, it doesn't always go well. 2004's The Punisher. We've made it to 2004, and for some reason, this passes for fashion back then. Don't mock me, this is the best I can do without finding a fedora. We're about to enter a really strange era of Marvel movies, so I guess it matches, but let's contrast that with our first film. Following the same theme of the grittier, darker, and obviously super cool looking superhero movies, we move on to the second Punisher film in this list, which seems insane to me. But long gone are the days of finally waiting for Dolph to sneeze as Thomas Jane picks up the mantle of Judge Judy and executioner. After his final mission working undercover for the FBI goes wrong and a Nepo baby is caught in the crossfire, Frank's entire family is taken out. And he is, for a brief, brutal moment before using plot armor to parry the explosion and vowing immediate vengeance on the man who caused this. The father of the Nepo baby caught in the crossfire, John Travolta, playing, if we're being honest, he's playing John Travolta in this film. Throughout the course of it, Frank doesn't just mow down a whole bunch of assassins in incredibly sick ways, he systematically takes out dominoes that cause the collapse and ruin of every inch of John Travolta's life, driving him to the brink of insanity, doubting every decision he's ever made in his life. And if I'm honest, it gets super good when all of this starts kicking into gear. Like 60% of this film is incredibly good, and the other 40% is very, 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 very boring. The most crucial part of this is that Howard Saint is so unfathomably useless that I don't think there's a single moment in this film where I'm like, oh yeah, Frank Castle might lose. Well, apart from the big battle against the assassin called the Russian, which this scene is so good, and once this video's done, if you can find it on YouTube, it's so fun. This film's very clearly taken inspiration from all the great revenge stories, be it Othello or the Count of Monte Cristo, but the villain is just a textbook, bland, beige mobster. It isn't until he's driven insane and starts killing everyone around him that Travolta does a lot better. But then when it starts to actually build up some really good momentum with some quite cool shots, if I'm being honest, and of course, this unbelievably funny line.
You killed my son.
Both of them.
That's just so good, man. The final blow in this is just so much overkill, which I imagine a lot of people probably want in this, but it's so dumb. Frank tells him what he's done. Howard doesn't respond in any way apart from crying and moaning. Frank ties him to a car. It starts slowly driving away before it explodes. The camera starts pulling out. About 900 other cars explode, revealing a flaming skull face. Where'd you have the time to do this? Genuinely, if the ending had landed a little bit better to me, I think you would have all thought I was rage baiting you and I probably would have ended up around here, but sadly it's going in C. It is crazy to me that out of all we've got so far, the two films that have caused me the most trouble were Ang Lee's Hulk film and the 2004 Punisher. I really didn't expect that. Next in the order we should have 2004 Spider-Man 2, but because the ones afterwards are so horrendously bad, I'm going to pick Spider-Man 2 and Spider-Man 3 up, put them at the end of the video, because it also helps me with the outro point that I want to make, and I want to get through the really bad ones first. You shouldn't be grouped in 2004. This feels like an awful fate. 2004. Blade Trinity. Have you ever thought to yourself, what would a movie look like starring Ryan Reynolds as the quippy comedic relief, throwing jokes directly at the audience for the entire film's runtime, taking the energy, suspense and drama out of every scene he's in? What? You're telling me that's every single Ryan Reynolds film? Blade Trinity is absolutely horrendous on every level. The story is unbelievably boring, but not even in a fun way like Captain America or the Old Punisher, where I can giggle at the absurdity of it and laugh at Ragdoll falls off the edge of a cliff, but boring on the grounds that it genuinely feels like a parody you would see from Scary Movie or Meet the Spartans rather than an actual sequel.
How do you bankroll this operation?
I date a lot of older men. Come on, man, I'm joking.
Where clearly they've taken some inspiration from some of the greats of storytelling. Dostoevsky, Homer, Fortnite, and introducing a character by shouting their name directly at the audience.
Evening, ladies.
Henry Lewis! Aside from that, the shots look bland and boring. Quite a lot of the scenes in this are pretty much framed and lit like a car commercial. Ford, we sell cars and stuff. What a slogan. My guess is they were once again going for the gritty crime drama aesthetic, but in the end, everything just looks so flat and lifeless. Where are the colours, my guy? The absolute worst part of this is that Blade doesn't even have the energy to aura farm anymore. His heart's clearly not in it. Do you smell the whiff of hay and bubbles in the air? Because I think my goat is washed. They don't even let him have his cool ass one-liners anymore. Hannibal King always sneaks in out of nowhere to take them from him.
Call ourselves the Night Stalkers.
Sounds like rejects from a Saturday morning cartoon.
Well, we were gonna go with the Care Bears, but that was taken.
It is wild to me how Wesley Snipes can't even hide his disdain for the film in the scenes that he shot for the film that are in the final film. Just like Daredevil before it, it's painfully obvious the only reason this film exists is to set up a spin-off based on Hannibal King or Abigail Whistler, whilst Blade would be left to the wayside. But instead of risking it and just making a spin-off on their own, they thought they could coast on the financial success of the first two, wheel out Wesley Snipes, make this awful movie as a connective bridge, then make $1 bajillion for the end of days. Overall, I cannot imagine that this was a fun set for anybody involved. I know I've been quite critical of the quippy Ryan Reynolds jokes, but I can't imagine to anyone on the cast and crew that turning up to the set every day and expecting to get berated for 12 hours wouldn't have been fun. That being said though, it's still a really bad film, and I think it sort of battles it out with these guys down in F. Still think Captain America's worse though. 2005. Elektra. This film fucking sucks. End of. Do you know how badly I just want to have that for Elektra? That is all it deserves. It's going there. This film is the absolute pinnacle of comic book movies. It has all the tropes that we've come to know and love. First off, spin-off from a film that was critically panned? Check. Have no other characters from that first film make an appearance in this one, because even though it's based on that first film, you want to make your own world detached from it? Check. Try to be bleak and serious but end up being unfathomably boring? Check. Before, most crucially of all, introduce a bunch of villains with little to no explanation and then proceed to defeat those villains unbelievably easy in incredibly comedic ways. Fucking pentuple check. Around minute 59 there's a villain who I cannot remember the name of that chases Elektra into the forest. Her blades break when hitting them. She climbs up a tree. This villain then swings a weapon so hard that it cleaves the base out from that tree before moments later being crushed by that same tree. Do they not understand how gravity works? Is that why they turned to a life of crime? It also has a flashback scene covered in the Studio Ghibli AI piss filter. What is that supposed to convey? That someone had Cheetos and then handled the lens? With all of that in mind, I go back to my prior review. This film fucking sucks. End of. We now find ourselves in what I'm calling the last scramble, where every single major studio that did a dodgy deal to save Marvel from bankruptcy back in the day are frantically combing through filing cabinets and the back rooms to find any inch of intellectual property they can spin a multi-million-dollar franchise off of, and just because they want to, do some shameless product placement. It looks so natural. Out of every single film that I've spoken about so far, there's been a pretty consistent step-by-step guide that every single studio has followed up to this point. Take a well-known superhero that a lot of people love, turn the saturation down and put the contrast all the way up, bada bing bada boom, make $500 bajillion. As we saw here, that's not as bulletproof a strategy as they once thought it was. And now the strategy's got to deviate, and we're about to see our biggest change yet. 2005. Fantastic Four marks the first film in this list since Captain America in 1990 to have received a PG rating. And I know it doesn't sound that important and I'm giving it a lot of emphasis here, but that very much is. This is the very first instance of big money studios pushing the pendulum from gritty, gory, violent superhero movies to comedic family fun, making it more accessible so more people can see it, and crucially, so they can make more money, because that's the point of these things at the end of the day. Not that any of the gore and violence would have worked here though, because I think we remembered what happened in 2015. That being said though, I did really enjoy this film, especially coming off the back of the double showing from hell in Elektra and Blade Trinity. Having the chance to laugh at scenes that you're actually supposed to laugh at was actually a refreshing change of pace. It's an incredibly fun, goofy film that you'd feel okay watching with your family before inhaling a whole bucket of popcorn without realising it. To me, the biggest thing that they get right is the dynamic of the main four bouncing off of each other. The dialogue may sound like it's come straight from a soap opera at some points, but just like me eating a fresh plate of beans on toast, they will wholeheartedly embrace the cheese whenever they can.
You can't use your powers in public, Johnny.
You guys are worse than NASA.
Maybe it's missing a utility belt.
The main downsides here are anything related to Doctor Doom, as even though they prop him up as this big, bad, evil villain, he doesn't feel menacing to me at any point, even when he's getting a second opinion from this doctor. The main reason for this was because I kept finding it so funny whenever they would do a really hard cut from Johnny making out with hot nurses and doing sick wheelies to Doom having the absolute worst week of his life. I do find it funny though how at the start of the film he's going fucking bonkers simply because he's losing hair, looks a little bit less attractive apparently because he now has a scar, and also losing money. It'll happen to us all one day. Actually, scratch that. I'm pretty sure there's a point in this film where he turns into like Metal Mario Emperor Palpatine. I hope a crystal ball doesn't see that in my future. The best scene that Doom is even tangentially connected to is when they defeat him at the end of the film. He's very much frozen in place and everybody's just cheering around. Reed's stretching effects only look horrendous every now and again, which for a 20-year-old film is an absolute dub. And crucially, Ben Grimm is just about as great as he could be. From the voice to the practical suit to his interactions with all three of them, to something as tiny as the rocks shifting on his back when he's picking something up. And even in this incredibly goofy movie, he's one of the only people allowed to show moments of depth and despair. But in insane contrast to this, when rewatching this, it is incredibly obvious that either the writer or directors just didn't care about Sue Storm or Jessica Alba, with the only running joke she gets throughout the majority of the film being that she has to get naked quite a lot, which we all know is the absolute peak of comedy, but it's all just absolutely needless, especially in this scene. Johnny and Reed manage to walk through all of these people just fine. Why does she have to undress here? I know her clothes would be floating in the air and people would freak out, but there is a literal orange rock man jumping about and causing havoc. I think people have other things to worry about. How on earth do you judge cheese? Like, it's really enjoyable and I'd watch it again if it was on, but it's also really bad. I think it's a high C, but I'm not sold on that one. You might see a few of these jump around. 2006, X-Men: The Last Stand. One thing I'm starting to realise when watching through a lot of these films is that my brain is clearly made of a loose stack of pebbles. There's a pivotal scene in this film about 20 minutes in where Scott goes to see where Jean sacrificed herself at the end of the last film. She appears, they have a weird goopy kiss, sound effects ping up in the background, and then it cuts. I did not realise until 20 minutes later when Logan says this,
I think she killed Scott,
that this goopy kiss was the end of him. At least he went out the way that he lived. Off camera, X-Men: The Last Stand clearly saw the financial success of the first two films, disregarded that entirely, and opted to follow along with the structural guidelines of 2003's Daredevil. There are far too many scenes here that just don't feel connected at all. You've got the whole mutant cure thing, and then all the way over here, you've got Jean evaporating bald men and then making out with Hugh Jackman. I think you could put a very clear line between these two and have two completely okay films in their own right. Pretty much every scene with Famke Janssen is unbelievable, and it shows what happens when you actually give the actors you hired in your film dialogue. Also, Kelsey Grammer as Beast is a breath of fresh air whenever he's on screen. It really shows how big of an impact this character had on me, as before going into this I thought he was in all 3 films. I'm pretty sure he gets more impactful monologues in this film than James Marsden does in the past 3 combined. I don't think it's outrageous to say that it's the worst out of the X-Men trilogy, but I'm really struggling whether it's a C or a B. I think just because the plot is so confusing, it's the bottom of C, because at least the Punisher and Fantastic Four sort of stick to their stupidity. We're a bit stacked in the stinkers, aren't we? 2007, Ghost Rider. This is a super interesting film, and in the scale of this video, it actually points to a pretty important point. Ghost Rider is at its best when it's being super goofy and stupid, whether that's in this scene of Nicolas Cage laughing insanely at a monkey on TV.
Can I just turn this music off for a minute?
Mac, you touch the Carpenters or that chimp video again, and we got a scrap on our hands.
This chump is nuts.
Or when he rides up a skyscraper on a motorcycle, because that's just fun. However, no matter how much I love that stuff, this film is at its absolute worst when there are actual actors on the screen doing the acting, with the main emphasis here being on the villain Blackheart, who constantly looks like he's about to show you a super funny meme he found on his phone. Not everyone is terrible here though. Just like the Hulk, Sam Elliott is unfathomably cool whenever he gets on screen and is a lot more menacing than the villain. Nicolas Cage is Nicolas Cage, and I love that. And one of my favourite parts of the first Blade movie is Donald Logue, and he is also super good in this. His scenes with Johnny are great. I think the transformation of him turning into a evil skeleton man holds up quite well. But one thing I've got to say is I think the actual mix of Ghost Rider's voice is super weird at times.
Guilty.
He just sounds super quiet and muffled all the time. It points to the age-old question of how would a skeleton sound? Because I guess all the air would escape out of his ribs, but against the backing of the sound effects and the music, it is really like talking like this quite a lot of the time. This one has made me change the order. X-Men Last Stand has been relegated to D, and Ghost Rider is at the top of D, because I just can't put X-Men The Last Stand above Ghost Rider. 10 million times out of 10 million, I would rather have an incredibly goofy film with Nicolas Cage in it. It's still bad though. Mainly that's just the villain. He sort of brings it down. And Mephisto. He's also super boring. 2007, Fantastic Four, Rise of the Silver Surfer. Out of most of the films in this list, I think this is the most egregious example of merchandising happening before my very eyes. Which I know is saying something because, again, as a little one, I very vividly remember all the Wolverine toys that came from the X-Men films. I had quite a lot of them. But whenever I saw any of the scenes of the four swapping powers with one another, I vividly remember walking through Toys R Us as a child and seeing so many variations of the Human Torch toy just flying off the shelves, and I just think of like a bunch of fat cats rubbing their hands together and laughing maniacally. I get that you had to change it up, but just like a lot of the films that I've spoken about, there's far too much going on here. You've got the power switching, Reed and Sue's wedding, the Silver Surfer coming down as a herald of Galactus, Galactus being a cloud, Doom becoming human again, Doom turning evil again, Doom stealing the Silver Surfer board. There is just so much all the time. It's not horrendously bad, but it just feels quite rushed, and so much ends up happening that I don't think gets resolved. I wasn't a big fan of Doom in the first one, but why is he in this? Although they use the swap powers to defeat him, with Johnny becoming the main character, the fight lasts like 3 minutes before he's walloped into the sea by Ben using a crane. Especially when your film contains the most menacing character I've seen in any of these films in the form of this little freak.
There are certain things I'm not permitted to do because they're considered human rights violations. Fortunately, you're not human.
Where's his spin-off? And although this film did give us the gif of Reed busting it down on a dance floor and doing the thing with his fingers, it continues the incredibly annoying trend of just giving Sue Storm sweet fuck all to do in this film. In this article from The Vulture in 2010, they use a quote from Jessica Alba talking about her experience filming the sequel and how the director, Tim Story, said to her, "It looks too real. It looks too painful. Can you be prettier when you cry? Cry pretty, Jessica. Don't do that thing with your face. Just make it flat. We can CGI the tears in. What a colossal prick. It just feels like a bonkers amount of studio meddling was going on in the back end of this to make sure they could sell more merchandise. But I think no matter how hypocritical I'm probably being at certain points, at the end of the day, all of this ranking is boiling down to my overall enjoyment of the film. So I think it just has to go into D. It's better than The Punisher, it's worse than X-Men and Ghost Rider. Now on the topic of studio interference, I think it is time for us to finally bring these puppies home as we get to talk about Peak and then something a little bit less peak. 2004, Spider-Man 2. This film is absolutely incredible and it makes everything else on this list look like me in comparison, and by that I mean awful. So many of the films on this list are good comic book movies. I'm never getting that in frame. But when you expand from it and compare them to films that aren't about superheroes, obviously they cannon down the ranking. But Spider-Man 2 absolutely holds its own. It obviously isn't the perfect film and includes aspects that are incredibly annoying that others in the list do, from goofy 2000s CGI bodies being thrown around and odd line deliveries, but it absolutely shines in its smaller human moments that most of the other films in the list, out of frame over here, absolutely do not possess. Everyone in this film is struggling, from Pete, Harry, MJ, May, Jameson. They're all having one of the worst weeks of their life, and that's saying something because in the last film 2 of the main characters die, and because of this it makes me want to root for everyone. Even Otto, actually especially Otto. He's a flawed man trying to do something better than himself and gets lost in that vision along the way. However, after getting punched in the head a lot, which is always what confused me, I know like Norman could withstand Spider-Man's punches because he inhaled a lot of green gas, but isn't Octavius just a regular dude with arms on his back? How does he withstand so many hits? He realises after getting walloped so many times that what he's doing is obviously wrong, and he sacrifices himself, so in the end, he's not a monster. One of the main things that kept catching my attention though is that there are so many moments of just calm. Take for instance this scene around 30 minutes into the film. It's after Spider-Man has just lost his powers and has to actually take an elevator. You don't see many of these smaller moments in big blockbuster films nowadays, especially superhero films. Realistically, it's probably going to get cut. Just look at what happened in Superman earlier in the year with the squirrel incident. James Gunn almost cut it because test audiences reacted negatively to it. They didn't see the point of this scene in the film. But I think it's one of the most impactful scenes in it. It humanises the character and makes you realise no being is too small or insignificant for Superman. This is all a part of this larger machine of satisfying not only audiences but more importantly shareholders and this wider story at large. Every second has to be important to the story in a way that is incredibly obvious, otherwise it's pointless. It actually reminds me of Ben Starr's Golden Joysticks awards speech from a few days ago when I filmed this. It's unbelievably relevant.
That is why this game is great, is because they wanted to make it good for the people they're making it for. They didn't want it to be popular. So they wrote characters that are flawed. They wrote characters that are broken, and they wrote characters that ultimately you might hate.
Their imperfection is human. Some of them make absolutely infuriating decisions and are incredibly dumb, but aren't we all at times? Sam Raimi and the cast and crew made this film because they wanted to tell the story, not because they had to sell a boatload of Venom toys. 2007, Spider-Man 3. We need to talk about the Eddie Brock situation. This film is very bad. I was going into this thinking, oh, maybe I could end this on a moment of happiness and redemption and how these films aren't all bad, but this one stinks. I've got to factor in how this was the last film and also I was watching it at 2:30 in the morning, so this could be why I was getting quite annoyed by this. But so many promising, heartwarming moments in this film get absolutely crushed under the big gooey symbiote boot of studio interference. Whenever you get to a moment and start thinking, wow, that's a really interesting thing, I hope they develop this a bit more, we do a hard cut to a completely different location and a completely different narrative arc. It just sort of gets forgotten in the background, which is wild because I think this is the longest film on the list. So you think there'd be enough time to get through it all, but fuck far too much is happening at any one time, and yet all of it is insanely infuriating. I don't know if that's the point, maybe I'm missing that. There's so much potential with Sandman as both a villain, a character, and with the actor that they cast. But just like Fisk in Daredevil, if we're going all the way back, you don't get nearly enough of them because there's so many other people to focus on. Mainly there are two other evil dudes doing evil things, actually, and I guess an evil photographer. Eddie Brock is absolutely the worst part of this film. He is unfathomably dumb. Take away the fact that he's Venom for a grand total of maybe 15 minutes at the end of the film and then just jumps into an explosion. Or the whole meme thing of praying to God to kill a photographer. It is absolutely insane that Brock hates Peter as much as he does.
Do you remember what you did to me?
Just to recap here, as he's almost crying his eyes out saying these lines, at this point in the film, Eddie Brock was trying to become a photographer for a reputable news outlet and fabricated photos in order to get a job. And then when Emo Peter comes in with his dumbass haircut to point it out, Eddie says this.
Look, I'm begging you. If you do this, I will lose everything.
Brother, you were in journalism and you knowingly faked fucking evidence. I think normal Peter would have picked up on this. Do you understand the levels of journalistic integrity you break there? I know it's common nowadays for everything to be fake, but this was 2007. I know I said I wanted characters to be flawed and it makes them human, but only when their decisions actually make fucking sense. Otherwise, they just come off as dumb as bricks. The only reason Eddie is annoyed at Pete is because Eddie needs to be at the church where Pete takes the symbiote suit off so he can become Venom. That's it. It's because of the plot. It's not because it makes sense to be in the plot. It's so dumb. And that is this entire film. Things happen because the plot says they need to happen, rather than them happening because it makes sense. And it absolutely means that this film rockets into D. There is just far too many films at the bottom end of that list, isn't there? I think my brain might be frazzled. The interesting thing about Spider-Man 3 and the very obvious studio interference to throw Venom in there because kids think he's cool and it'll sell more toys, strangely enough links to this video so perfectly. If you hadn't guessed by now, this is a sequel to the most popular video on my channel, which I put off making for so long because crucially, I hate that first video. Everything from the facial hair, the writing, the editing, the fact that I got a character's name and an actor's name mixed together and called Michael Pena Luis Pena. Most of all the goddamn voice cracks. I was very ill at the time and my kitten had just died. I was going through a very weird headspace. I wanted to try and think structurally and intelligently, which is difficult for me. Going back and watching all of these though, it was strange how many of them were focused on this darker, gritty, more violent aspect of superhero stories, I guess in an effort to distance themselves from the colourful pages of comic books. But then if we jump forward to nowadays in this current era of the MCU and I guess DC, especially post Ragnarok, every single film that you see has to have a comedic twinge to it. I guess you can see with how long it's taken for them to make a Blade film, even though Sinners has just done unbelievably well, that they're obviously scared about dipping their toes into these waters again. But I do very much feel like the pendulum's going to swing back that way, especially with how well Marvel Zombies did. But weirdly, because less and less people are showing up to the box office because Marvel keeps telling the same stories over and over again and they're incredibly formulaic, they've decided to turn to this current era to try and bring people back in with endless callbacks and cameos, needless sequels, nudge nudge wink wink, for no real reason. Because we all know the one true thing that will save the Marvel Cinematic Universe is Howard the Duck and Ben Affleck as Daredevil. That'll really solve every single problem. I don't think legally I should be allowed to look at another superhero movie for at least like 50 business days. My head is on fire. Thank you so much for watching and listening to me waffle for an insanely long period of time. I have no idea how this will do, especially with the recent turmoil here. This is probably going to be my last video of the year. I may be able to get another one out in time, but I'm not going to push myself to the limit. So thank you for sticking with me on this first proper year of me trying to do things. It truly means so much to me. And also a massive thank you to everybody on the wall of Patreon. I'm sorry I stole your corkboard to do a tier list, and it took so long to put all of these back up, as I'm probably showing over the top of my head right now. It took 35 minutes. If you want to try another film-based video, why not check out this one? Or if you want to just let fate decide, go for this one above my face. I need a cuppa, and I think I can hear the cat screaming. That's what happens when I spend 30 minutes putting things to a cork board. Oh my word.